Greetings! Welcome to the Witching Hour. Today I'm drawing Billie Eilish for a Draw This in Your Style challenge hosted by gigislab on Instagram. Go and check them out if you have a chance, they're really good. The reference I'm using of Billie is honestly the first one I came across of her with blonde hair rather than her more famous dark hair with green roots, both of which look lovely, but I wanted to keep to the original drawing as much as possible for this piece. It's unfortunately none of her most famous hairstyle. The method I used this time is where I begin with blocking out shapes rather than a sketch. I find this method works better for my drawings, so I wanted to start introducing it into the channel as well. I began with the head, trying to get the shape right, as Billie is quite angular, which I'm not best at drawing as of yet. Then I moved on to the hair, which I wasn't quite happy with, but I tried to leave this step as rough as possible to preserve the sketchiness of it. I moved on to the hands, which I decided to change the position of from the original, just to give it my own twist. And finally the hoodie, which took me a while honestly, because I can't really figure out how cloth works for some reason. I'm not sure if that's just because I haven't drawn in a long time or what. This is where I start changing proportions and the size in general. I also tried to fix the hair a little bit, although it didn't really work since it still turned out to be my least favourite part of the piece. This is where I started doing a more traditional sketch. I started with the face as I usually do, and at this point I wasn't really trying to go for facial accuracy. I was just trying to put the features in the correct places, and then later on I used digital painting to change the features to match Billie's a bit more. This is where I start the hair, which was actually the part I struggled with most in this piece. Likely just to disuse. I haven't drawn very long hair in a while. I should practice that probably. This is where I started the hand. Now, hands are difficult and all, but I think while sketching this one, I completely forgot how they worked. So some of these sketches look rather mutated. I wonder why it's hard to draw hands properly. Is there actually an explanation, or is it just a unanimous problem that everyone has for no real reason? Because of how difficult this hand was, I decided to take a break before the next one by doing the hoodie. This was fairly simple as I just had to go over the lines. This is where I started the second hand, which was much simpler, perhaps because I draw this pose quite a lot. I started the second sketch, which honestly I'm not sure I needed for this piece. It became more of a force of habit that I always do to rounds of sketching, but for this piece I really could have done without. The hair is probably the best place to show how unnecessary the extra sketch was, since I was basically just going over the sketch but lowering the top of it, which I could have done anyway. And for the rest of the sketch I'm basically just tracing the first sketch. While I'm doing that, I'll talk about the subject of this drawing. Billie Eilish is, well, very famous. She's an American singer-songwriter who has made plenty of very popular songs. Particularly Ocean Eyes and Bad Guy are the ones that come to my mind. Although, to be honest, I haven't really interacted with much of her stuff, but it all seems very cool from the sound of it. I'm excited to see what she does next, really. She's quite young, 19 I believe, so hopefully she's got a really fulfilling career ahead of her. And this is where I start colouring. I started with just base colours, which was quite simple for this piece. Just 3 colours, skin, hair and hoodie. It still took me ages because I can't really find a quick way to colour, which is slightly embarrassing because I've been using this program for years now really. One would think that I'd found something at this point, but no, I am forced to go back and erase the extra bits like a peasant. This is where I do my first pass of shading, just so I can figure out the light source. I decided on the light coming from the left, and I also use this to figure out some colours and make sure they looked cohesive. As always, I started with the skin, however I started out with these really muted, muddy colours, which I had to fix later on. I'm not sure why I decided on these in the first place. Perhaps my screen was a bit weird at the time, I'm not sure. Usually I go too saturated and then have to desaturate, but this time it was a complete opposite, which is kind of funny. This is where I used the color balance tool to fix up the colors. Right now they probably look far too saturated, but that helps for later on when I'm adding more layers so there's still a brightness underneath it. Here I'm starting to put in more facially accurate aspects to the piece. This was a lot more difficult than I would have liked, mainly because it had been a while since I've tried to capture likeness. I tried to focus on making the general form more angular, and adding volume in certain areas without dipping into realism, as I was going for a very soft style to contrast with the other aspects of this piece, particularly the background. I started with the nose for no real reason. All I did was add value to it to make it seem more like Billie's nose. Nothing special really. The next thing I did was her forehead. This time I changed the colours to be more yellow toned to apply a simple colour story to the piece. I also changed the lighting slightly to fit with the other aspects, because for some reason I made the forehead have a different lighting to the rest of the piece. I'm not sure why that happened, but it did. One of the things I've done to try and make the eyes seem more hooded was adding more space to the lid and making them more deep set by adding shading just underneath the eyes. The rest of this is basically adding more angularity, so I'll let you watch without having to listen to my rambling. Now I'm adding detail to the nails, basically just adding the colour and highlights. I also made them very sharp because I was inspired by one of my friend's nails that were just incredibly sharp, and I honestly wonder how people manage to exist with those nails. I could never. Now I'm doing the hair, which I kept very soft, perhaps too much so since I ended up not liking it, but I guess that's just a lesson learned. I started out with the cell shading, but then softened it exponentially. Maybe that's why I didn't quite like it, because I started out something different in mind. And of course, ink tears, because I find them really beautiful and I want to try and do them at least once in life. I'm not sure how one would get the effect, but if I find a way, I will do it. For the background, I decided on some abstract skull-shaped blobs, because why not? And that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Please try to like, subscribe, all of that fun YouTube stuff if you would like to. And I hope to see you again at the witching hour.